What up, naughty steppers? It's Connor Whitmore here again with another video for you on the Nawtystep channel. I've just had my hair cut, and that can only mean one thing. It's time for a monthly Extra Nawties roundup, where I go over some EPs, albums and compilations that I wasn't able to review in full, but that I still enjoyed and thought interesting enough to give you some thoughts on. These are shorter reviews because there is a lot to get through, so I'll just be identifying my main points with each one, maybe showing you something that you hadn't heard of yet. Stuff released on the 28th of May and after will not be reviewed in this video but the next. There's actually a fair few releases on this video from the end of April, and the releases are covered in alphabetical order by way of artist name or record label name if it's a compilation. And so kicking off this installment, we have the latest EP from Axel Boy, Hypnotism. It's got that huge, buzzing, deeply vibrant Axel Boy feel to it, with all those high-pitched female vocals. It's distinctively him. He jumps on the old-school Rusko sound that a lot of artists have been opting for in the past year or so. The best of which comes in Magnetism, where there's just a really noticeable chemistry between all the sounds on show. He also dips into house and grittier styles of dubstep to give his aesthetic that bit of variety across the 5 tracks. But the ideas just aren't as adventurous for him, in my opinion. Maybe he's set too high a standard, but there's not that much here that really wows me. Such a great producer, and honestly a really great guy too. One of my favourite people in the bass scene for sure. But I think he'd want me to be honest, and whilst this stuff is very decent in its animation and general Axel Boy feel, with good transitioning between sections, the ideas themselves just aren't on a level with his previous stuff, in my opinion. We'll always be excited for what he comes out with going into the future though. He has so many different styles to his repertoire, you never really know what he's going to come out with next. He's as versatile as they come. If you haven't heard much of him, then I recommend checking out some of his earlier stuff because it's so great. Tracks like Third Degree, Can of Worms with dub loads, Phantom Pain, Bun Up and Ton Up, Bodied. There are so many. Now, quite simply, if you like your hybrid trap, your rhythm, and everything in between, delivered in an extremely ravenous way, then this EP from Calcium is for you. 3 impactful tracks with so much going on in the way of fitting in sounds wherever he can, but it all coheres for the most part, creating this pretty vicious end product, but I wouldn't ever say it goes overboard. Nothing overtly bad to say about this one. It's got variety and spice and doesn't leave you hanging in any way by repeating the same 8 bars over and over, that's for sure. Excited for what this guy comes out with next? This is a very interesting conceptual EP here from Download. Some mix between Porter Robinson, Dog Blood and Fool would fit right in at Monstercat. Complextro, electro house, progressive house, even got a bit of electro swing and jazz in the 5th track. It brings a lot together. All through this meta lens where we have an internet figure talking to us through the World Wide Web. Beyond the idea of the EP itself, the music is mostly well constructed, with a great variety of ideas on display. If you haven't heard it yet, don't expect anything outright heavy. It has its heavy elements, but is more about its storytelling vibe. Would definitely go out on a limb and say it's one of the more compelling projects I've heard this year. There are definitely points where the sound is lacking slightly and not as riveting. But more importantly, I think the music ties together with the overall theme so well. Very underground, grungy drum and bass EP here from Emperor, with lots of interesting elements to it. The classical influence in the opening track, the brass sounds in Claws, the somber feel to Half Makes Whole, the tribal essence of Navigante. But fundamentally, this is a dark, purposeful collection of tracks that is very pure and organic in its delivery. There's nothing forced about these tunes. Maintains a good level of intensity through its changes in mood, going from aggressive to more soothing as mentioned. But yeah, if you like your drum and bass forceful and varied, check this one out. 4 really solid tunes here. Moving on from there, and I mean that is further evidence of 2018 being a very good year for drum and bass so far, thanks to the Critical Music label, but also the Meth Lab label, and this Except EP from them only strengthens the drum and bass cause even further. Quite understated stuff, cracks on with minimal fuss but just has such a magnetic pull to it, hard to put down. An EP that picks up more and more as it progresses in terms of the amount of sounds. The track listing here is on point. Very well assembled, deep, swampy and guttural, packs a real punch without being too outlandish or extroverted. Just another really solid 4-track drum and bass EP. A selection of really decent, bass-fueled house tracks here from the Gold Digger label, a must-listen for anyone trying to get into the darker side of house music. Been really enjoying Gold Digger's output generally actually over the last couple of years. A lot of it's so great, they deserve way more recognition as a label. But shout out Ed Gain, Loss and Back to Black for these tracks. They've all got their own thing going for them and sit very well alongside each other. My favourite is probably the Loz one, just got a really nice bouncy and cheeky vibe to it, really gets me moving. Yeah guys, please check out this label if you haven't already. They do bass house, G house, house and breakbeat hybrids, lots on offer, and perfect as I said if you're trying to get into the darker side of house music. Somewhat expected something a little more drum and bassy here from Ivy Lab, but they go almost fully down the glitch route with this sophomore album. Very weird, quirky, bubbly music that is like being in a continuous altered state. Not to mention the title of this album, Death Don't Always Taste Good, it's a load of really beyond the ordinary ideas. Certainly not what I thought I would be hearing as I said, but a very welcomed surprise, that's for sure. I also find myself getting into this sound increasingly as the album goes on, unearthing more and more idiosyncrasies as I go along. Some tracks are more bass driven, others led more by synths. It's an interesting dichotomy that runs through the 12 tracks. Experimental music tends to have nowhere near as much structure as this, so it's nice to see something so out there in terms of its sound, yet also with such a clear rhythm to it. It's not entirely alienating either. I mean, you have parts of really fruity musicality, like in the tracks Jet Lag and Cake, sounding a little bit like What's So Not's album released earlier this year. Several moments too where they were clearly inspired by Noisia, so that's where its drum and bass parts are. If you want something heavy and hard-hitting, then this isn't for you, but if you're looking for something a little different, check this album out. Now this is hypnotic, entrancing, stream of consciousness music from Mad Zach here. There's an oozy, underwater feel to these tracks, a very engulfing listen I would say. For a bit of context, I think it would fit right in at Truth's deep, dark and dangerous label. There's an extent to which a couple of the tracks drone on a little, holding your attention through their constancy, as opposed to any variety they may have. But that aside, I think it's a really well-controlled EP that has a definite goal in mind and just goes about its ways, with each track being markedly different. There's a fair bit of this subsumed, mind-numbing approach going on in the dark electronic music scene this year, but none with the continuity that this one possesses. A pretty rough around the edges, light bro-step album here from Nanomake. A solid theme running through these 13 tracks with mostly slow-paced dubstep structures and little splashes of melody here and there. But not that refined, to be honest. The interaction between sounds goes from being really there to quite limp and loose, especially with the lack of variety in tempo. There's too much space vacated by everything that's there, and nothing filling those gaps to make the overall aesthetic much fuller. The song where it really comes together is Vision, a beautiful Panda Eyes-esque track, with Mist and Bound not too far behind. And for the most part I do like the high-pitched vocal manipulation that runs through it. It's a nice motif for the album. But if bro-step that isn't too in your face appeals to you as an idea, then check this album out. A couple good songs from this 7-track No Other Boy EP, but overall this leans towards the type of experimental music that I just find straight up difficult to get into. Almost entirely without structure and feeling, more like a mesh of sounds than anything particularly coherent. But this is what he intends with his music, and I know there are loads of people out there who absolutely love this kind of stuff. Just that I know I've really liked some of his stuff from the past. It's the patterns and grooves and bits of order that I really enjoy. And this one just goes off on way too many tangents for me to get into it. It is for some and it isn't for others. Very harrowing, metallic, industrial dubstep here from Ponicz. The ideas for the most part I'm not too big on. Very animated and energetic, but not that much colour or personality to these songs. But I suppose that is the nature of a Black Label release. Once again, it is for some and it isn't for others. I really enjoy the track Dem Boy, the style, the idea, but it just could have packed way more of a punch into the drop. I mean like Bad Clot level punch. Also feeling the marshy vibe of Ragamuffin, but once again there's nothing really about it as a whole that takes me off my seat. It's a well-made EP, there's a fair bit going on, but I'm just not feeling it that much personally. I imagine a lot of people love it though. This Deathstep EP from Poseidon pushes boundaries and goes beyond what you would normally expect from that genre, lending somewhat from other dubstep genres to have a boatload of variety and appeal to it. It's got some cinematic storytelling elements to it, jittery dubstep, going the extra mile every now and then to throw something at you that makes you just think, "Ooh, that's nasty." Just isn't entirely gruesome in its essence and delivery, which is quite refreshing. There's a lot going for it in both sound and structure. There are more complete songs for me of the four, notably the title track and Manticore. But to be honest, every song here has its good moments. Overall, a really solid project. Definitely check it out if you haven't already. Now this is a very naughty, well-managed house EP from Shift Key with a fair bit of bravado to it. Got a slight electro house feel to it through the drums, but doesn't quite verge on that. Sounds like a bass house EP in several ways without quite being that exactly either. Lots of cute little sounds to make it come across as very playful and jovial. The track Cowbell is particularly jumpy and juicy. I mean, the clue is in the name really. But yeah, again, if you want to get into the darker side of house, then you must check this one out. Not entirely representative of the Nightbase label or naughty house music in general, but it's definitely unique and worth a listen just for that. Now look, this guy has a great voice, and I'm all for people mixing heavy metal and dubstep together, which I'm surprised there isn't way more of, to be honest. But for me, there's something seriously lacking with the electronic parts of his music. There's a great rock, guitar-led feel to his tunes. They've got that really genuine aggressive energy. But the drops are just a bit wide of the mark, nothing full sounding about them, and just a bit weak really. The ideas aren't that bad, but there's just nothing really organic about the electronic parts of his sound. It just seems so haphazardly put together. As a result, the force of his voice and general metal vibe are just lost in what is meant to be the most impactful part of these songs, the drops. But as I said, fair play to him for bringing these two styles together. We need way more of it, and I'm interested to see what he does with his sound going forward. Very classic, bass-driven trap music here in this 9-track project from Uzi. Few glimmers of excellence here and there, most notably when he has rappers on his tunes, elevating the instrumentals in tracks like Flash and Cray. The final track, Castle, is also a very chilled, toned-down ending to the album, but for the most part pretty standard and expected from Mr. Bull Trap Music himself. 808 fueled, brimming with hi-hats and a whole manner of gloomy synths. If pretty run-of-the-mill trap beats are your thing, then this album is for you. And so that brings the May 2018 edition of the monthly Extra Nawties Roundup to a close. Thank you very much, and as always, for tuning in. Also a few in May that I enjoyed a decent amount besides these ones I just reviewed. Special mentions, if you will. So we've got Ray Volpe's No Emotion Allowed remixes, the Abstract Sonance EP, the Stratus EP, the Nazar EP. I'll link them all in the description box down below. In general, it was a big month for EPs in the dark electronic music scene, with the likes of Phase 1, Chime, Eliminate, Stabby, Muzzy all releasing one, reviews of which are all on the Nawtystep channel. As well as my written review for the Dystopolis EP from Bones Noise, which is up on his Instagram page if you're interested. But with regards to the EPs and albums reviewed in this video, which ones did you enjoy? Which ones hadn't you heard before? Are there some that I should have included? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this roundup video, then be sure to give it a big old thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, hitting that notification bell along the way so you can be notified whenever I upload to the Nawtystep channel. Next to my head there should be a link to some other Extra Nawties roundup videos if you enjoyed this one and are looking for some more dark electronic tunage to sink your teeth into. Links to all the projects discussed in this video, as well as all the Nawtystep social media accounts, are in the description box down below. And lastly, if it's naughty, then you know guys, so be sure as always to keep it naughty and stay safe. And I shall see you folks in the next video. Peace out.